Welcome to the Masters of Resilience podcast. This show is an exploration of the unseen and unheard stories of adversity that shape the journeys of high performers. These conversations will help you better understand the mindset, habits, and behaviors that empower these exceptional leaders to endure the most challenging moments of their careers and emerge stronger than ever. Your hosts are Ryan Seeger and Mark Phillips. Let's dive in to more.
Welcome back to Masters of Resilience, where we dive into the inner game of those who push boundaries, navigate uncertainty, and build things that matter. Today, we have a guest who embodies resilience in its truest form, both as a founder and as an investor. Breuer is no stranger to the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. She first stepped into the arena as the founder of Eza Nails, a venture-backed startup that aimed to reshape the nail salon industry. Through that experience, she learned firsthand what it takes to build something from scratch, face adversity head-on, and adapt when things do not go as planned. Now as a partner at Long Jump Ventures and an adjunct professor at Chicago Booth, Allie is helping the next generation of founders navigate their own journeys. She brings not just capital, but a deep understanding of what it means to endure, pivot, and build with purpose. In today's conversation, we discuss failure's role as the unsung hero of success, the difficulty in trying to acquire resilience, and the danger of relational toxicity in co-founders. Allie's passion for entrepreneurship and resilience is incredible. We know you'll appreciate it too. Let's dig into more. Allie, welcome to the Masters of Resilience podcast. We are so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to jump in. We shared a little bit of your background and the unique roles you have going on today. Obviously, you've got a background as an entrepreneur. You're now a professor, which is fantastic, of my alma mater business school. I don't know if business schools can have alma maters, but that is what it is for me. I'm grateful for my time at Booth and as an investor today. And I think to start the conversation, I'd love to have you share a story of kind of resilience in your life that really tested your focus, your motivation, and the things that kind of create your identity as an entrepreneur and as a person. So could you share a little bit of your background and some of those moments of resilience that have maybe challenged you the most?
Sure, absolutely. I think when I think about the most pronounced experience of resilience, I am always brought back to my experience at Eza as a founder and CEO. I think that you can't really talk about resilience without really addressing the topic of failure, right? They go hand in hand. But for most people, like talking about failure is really uncomfortable. It's really personal and kind of triggers these feelings of, disappointment, embarrassment. There's this element of like loss of reputation. And I wrestled with a lot of that throughout my journey of Eza, and it was really difficult. But yeah, it was really hard. But I think my journey as a founder really taught me that failure is actually not the enemy, but really the unsung hero of success. And I talk about that a lot with my students in my class at Booth. And it took a while to get there, and especially like throughout thinking about how we dealt with the pandemic, as a brick and mortar business. But I'm really grateful for my experience for Eza because it taught me truly what resilience means and how to appreciate it and value it too. So,
wow, the unsung hero of success. I've not heard it stated like that.
Such a great way to put it.
Really grateful for that framing.
Can
you just give a...
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say, I think like our whole lives, we work really hard. We push boundaries. We set like really big dreams to achieve success. Right? Right before we started, we were talking about like we often are talking about those like high moments. And a lot of the times when people think about entrepreneurship, they think about the success stories, but 99% of startups fail. And it's in those moments that require perseverance and resilience, that teach those moments that actually highlight the importance of failure and the role that failure plays in actually achieving success.
Can you share a little bit of context, Allie, just on the nature of the business, just to kind of underpin the magnitude of the challenge that you had to face?
Sure. Yeah. So let me take you to the beginning.
Sure.
Beginning of the ESA days. So it was about a little over 10 years ago, 2015. I was a first year booth student with no dreams of becoming an entrepreneur at all. It wasn't on my radar at all. I had different career aspirations. But everything kind of changed with one really simple experience of getting my nails done. So at the time, I was living in Old Town. I don't know if you've spent much time in Old Town, but there are tons of nail salons around every corner there. So I had many opportunities to get my nails done. But every time I would go, every visit just highlighted an industry that was stuck in the past for me. So it just felt it was like a really frustrating experience. I mean, it was an experience where, everything was cash payment and, who carries cash these days? Limited hours, like some of them open at 10 a.m. and close at 6. So if you're working, that's like a really impossible schedule. Inconsistent quality, inconsistent cleanliness. And it just, and a lack of technology adoption too. And as I started to dig into it more, I learned that it's a $12 billion industry and no one owns even 1% of market share. The industry just hadn't evolved. So I became pretty obsessed with learning more about the industry. And I decided to go to nail school. So while getting my MBA, I enrolled in nail school in Lincoln Park. And I learned that there wasn't just a problem on the customer side, that there were issues on the industry side as well. So without going into all of the details, juxtaposing my booth education with the nail school was truly, truly an interesting experience. But I learned that a lot of the nail technicians just weren't being prepared for their jobs. Like I didn't even have to give a manicure to graduate nail school, which is pretty insane. So the job is confusing. To provide nail services. And in order to graduate the 350-hour credentials, I didn't have to give a manicure. I just had to pass a test. And in the middle of all of this, too, New York Times came out with a pretty astonishing article called The Price of Nice Nails that highlighted the injustices that go on in the industry that were pretty shocking. Women work, the industry is typically 99% women, typically women from underrepresented backgrounds, women of color or immigrant women. And I'm first generation. My parents were immigrants. So that was nearly touched my heart a lot. And in the article, women working grueling hours, no breaks, not limited to, women suffering miscarriages due to toxic fumes in nail salons. It was horrifying what was going on. And so that's when I know hey, it's not working on the customer side. It's also not working on the nail technician side. And I wanted to change that. So that's when ESA was born. Our mission was empowering women on both sides of the manicure table.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So
there's so much there we could dig into. The juxtaposition between a booth MBA and nail salon school. We could probably spend several hours on that.
We spent a whole podcast on that.
We could a season of podcasts. But so you launched the business, and if I'm not mistaken, it was 2019 that you actually launched the business?
No, so we launched in 2017.
17, okay.
So we did the New Venture Challenge. We raised a pre-seed round to open up our first $500K to open up our first location. Within 5 months, we broke even. Within 8 months, we hit the $1 million run rate. Wow. It was skyrocketing. Shortly after we raised 1.5 million to open up a second and third location. The second location went even better. We broke even sooner. And at this point, we were, preparing for a Series A. So to actually go nationwide and scale the business, which was obviously the goal from the beginning. But that's when life, threw us a curveball. And in March of 2020, the whole world shut down.
Goodness.
Businesses were mandated to close, and revenue just halted abruptly, like immediately. We had to close all of our locations. And by the way, at the time, I had just had my firstborn too. So I had my firstborn at the end of January of 2020, and in March of 2020, we had to close our location. So it was pretty jarring. And the pandemic hit. So it was quite an experience. I mean, no one knew it. I don't know if you take yourselves back to 2020, but no one knew how long the pandemic was going to last. No one knew what this was.
2 weeks. Two more weeks.
Right. We all said 2 weeks. So actually, it's funny you say 2 weeks because my co-founder and I, we thought a lot about, okay, well, what do? Our businesses are closed. We had about a staff of 40 people who relied on their weekly paychecks to pay their bills. And so we decided immediately to stop taking salary, the two of us, and to continue to pay, to take care of our people first priority for us. So continue to pay our staff of 40. But after 2 weeks, we realized that it was unsustainable for us. We realized that the pandemic was going to be more than 2 weeks. We'll just put it that way. And we had this like moment where like back to our values, like what's important to us. Our people are important to us. They are worried. Their own livelihoods are depending upon as a paycheck. We had this deep responsibility to them. And so we ended up actually turning to our community of members, and we raised $30,000 to provide financial relief for our nail technicians during that time, so that we could continue paying them beyond those 2 weeks, which was just game changing.
From your customers.
From our customers, yes. That's how strong our community was on both sides of the table. The whole idea of EZA was around empowerment, around this tough as nails woman, and professionalizing the industry and bringing technician and customer together. And so we had built this like really strong community that when we were like, our nail technicians need help, our members showed up. And it was this bright light in this devastating moment of the pandemic where it was so beautiful. It was so touching. And we were so grateful for them.
So Ellie, as a leader, when you're with your partner in a situation like this, and obviously your back's up against a wall with like this undefined timeline of hardship, so to speak, what were some of the things that you guys did as leaders to try to give yourself hope?
Right. For us, the first thing was, how do we take care of our people financially so they feel like they can pay their bills? The second thing was, okay, how do we stop the bleeding? Because we were a brick and mortar location. Revenue had stopped, but our costs were still incurring. We still had rent that we had to pay. And so we were like, okay, well, let's try and renegotiate our rent. How can we stop the bleeding so that we can kind of envision a future for EZA? And so we approached our first landlord. He was fantastic, super understanding. We reached an agreement very quickly. Our second landlord was a little bit harder, but eventually we got there with him. Our third landlord was not at all, would not budge at all, was charging us full rent every month. And at this time, by the way, we were building out our location. So we hadn't launched our third location yet. And so we were just like, our hope was all built into how do we continue surviving as a business? And so how do we make decisions today so that we can continue to serve our community? And we realized we're like, okay, we're going to have to continue building out this third location. And whenever restrictions are lifted, be able to open up our doors so that we can financially just survive. And we had to make some very difficult decisions. Like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this now, but I will share it. Like we convinced our contractors at the time to continue building out the location. Our architect was on board. I don't know if you remember, but at the time it was only essential businesses allowed to operate or like
Right.
under construction or anything. So we were like hiding ourselves, getting into our
That's
location, like trying to build things out. Like I was bringing my baby into our third location, like feeding him while working with our contractors, all under disguise because I'm I am a rule follower, but I'm actually not really a rule follower.
Yeah. I don't believe you when you say you're a rule follower,
Okay,
Allie.
fine, I'm not. But I still was nervous about getting caught.
Of course. Of course.
And so had to make some kind of those tough decisions around, well, I know it's technically illegal to continue building out, but we have to do it. And so we got to make this work. And we had incredible partners who were on the same page as us. As well. But there were other like really defining moments of the pandemic as well, like much more than that. In 2020, so around June of 2020, I don't know if you remember, but like restrictions started to lift and our mayor said that businesses could start reopening. And so we were so excited. We're like, yes, let's open up our doors. Let's see what demand looks like. Let's test this out. What does demand look like during the pandemic? And reworked all of our operational procedures because we had to socially make sure our employees and our customers are socially distant. We had to train our employees and our customers on these new protocols. And we had to buy new, safety equipment, like, those like guards.
PPE and
all of that. Like
all the
I
things.
don't want to hear that term ever again, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't either. It's left my brain. Just because it was so intense. It was so intense around redesigning the entire customer and employee experience so that we could prioritize the health and safety of everyone. And not only that, like the marketing of that too, like making sure everyone felt safe as well. But in the midst of all of this, another tragedy happened in June of 2020. George Floyd was murdered. And that triggered a national reckoning of racial injustice and inequality that sounded throughout the entire nation. And it was something that really hit us very deeply because our workforce was incredibly diverse, including Black employees. And this was something that was emotionally very triggering and very powerful. And they were looking to us. How were we going to respond? Everyone was demanding transparency on social media. And so we were focused on like this operational, like redefining the operational elements of our business so we could open, but then something that was core to like our values, as it was built on the values of empowerment and inclusivity and diversity and respect, that we had to focus on that issue and address that issue within EZA and pause the operational components at the time.
Wow.
Priority. And that was true to and core to our identity and our core values. So we refocused our priorities and really assessed what were the systemic and structural policies and protocols we had in place that potentially contributed to this problem and self-reflect, because nobody is perfect. No company is perfect. And come up with a plan that would address some of these issues. And we came up with 4 different commitments to increase Black representation in our leadership and many others, and set up meetings to actually talk with all of our employees about what was going on and the changes that we wanted to make and hear about their perspectives too and their challenges. And it was incredibly meaningful to the soul of our company. But it also took away from our priorities of reopening too, to be quite honest. But it was a decision I would make a million times over again.
Right. Allie, you went from such heights. I'm just struck by, the growth you shared of the first location and the second and the third. you were flying pretty high.
I
Those
know.
were probably
I
some really
know.
fun moments. Yeah. And then you just entered into this gauntlet, for lack of a better phrase.
Mhm.
And I guess I want to turn the camera a little bit introspectively. You're becoming a new mother in those moments. There are all these things happening. I mean, really, I almost can't fathom it. As you look back and you think about that time in your development as a mom, as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, a really successful entrepreneur, what do you look back on in terms of the growth that you experienced and how the gauntlet you went through really contributed to that growth as you as a person?
Yeah, I think that it wasn't until after decisions were made that we ended up winding down as the short of it, um, because our business model was flipped upside down. Um, the pandemic had wreaked havoc on the downtown. Our business model relied on a high concentration of working professional women in the downtown area, and that contributed to our high utilization rates, which enabled us to be profitable so quickly. And that wasn't the case anymore. So women were not going downtown. Women were not going into the office anymore. And so our real estate strategy just didn't work anymore. And it was we despite us trying our hardest, like we pivoted online, we launched products, like we invested in content marketing. I mean, we tried our darndest hardest to make the business work. Anything that we could do, but our customer just had changed. The world had changed, and it was in the process of I get even emotional, like thinking about it now. Making the decision to wind down Eza, that I learned more about who I am as a leader, and more about staying true to my own values too, versus performative metrics or letting ego kind of stand in the way of what's truly meaningful and valuable and authentic. Because to be honest, like we could have continued trying to operate Eza, but it would have been death by 1,000 cuts. And it wouldn't just be death by 1,000 cuts for us as founders. It would be for our employees. And that's what mattered the most to us and our customers too. Like we would be constantly paralyzed by fear that something else could happen, or like that we wouldn't be able to make payroll. We knew that the landscape had changed, so our economic model just didn't work anymore. And we did not want to do that to our community that we valued so much. It would have protected our ego much more to could just continue and run out of cash and felt better and felt more successful. But we knew eventually we knew what the fate was. So I learned a lot about myself as a leader. I learned a lot about what it means to have an incredible partner, a co-founder who shares those same values, and how integral that is to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Because if we were on different pages, that would have been a whole other story, you know?
By a long shot. What a powerful thing to share, that you learned. What I heard you say is you learned more about yourself as a leader in the shutting down of Eza than really in any other moment. And if I can try to put a phrase to it, because this is what I heard, you made decisions that prioritized others ahead of yourself. And
Yes.
that is a really powerful thing. I think if I had to put a term to that, that's servant leadership. And so is that how you think about
Yes.
is that the language you would put to what you learned about yourself as a leader through that experience?
It's so funny you say that, because I truly believe in servant leadership. That is what guides like my leadership philosophy. That is why I ended up going to nail school in the beginning, was all about servant leadership. It's about understanding the work so that you can serve your employees and serve others. And we were in it not because of nails. We were in it to make the impact nationwide. And it's about the value. And so entrepreneurship is funny though, because you can get caught up in these moments of yourself, and you really need it's the opportunities that force you to self-reflect and go back to your passion and vision and mission and values that I think are the best learning opportunities. And so, and I think that's what has led me to where I am today as well, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was the genesis of Eza was about other people. Like I didn't want to be an entrepreneur, actually. I had come from the industry of nonprofit education, Teach for America, like working grueling hours, low pay. I went to business school thinking I was going to go a different route. And I actively did not want to be an entrepreneur, but I felt like my calling. It felt like home to me. And so, it was incredible. And that is also what fuels my work as a professor today. It's serving others. It's serving the next generation of entrepreneurs. And what I've learned is that Eza actually isn't dead. The chapter actually isn't closed on Eza. And that was also a very important lesson for me, because I went through that whole, I didn't just arrive at this. I want people to know that it doesn't happen like in the, snap of a finger that you get all these learnings. You go through kind of stages of grief, I think, and self-reflection. And I felt like Eza was my identity, and I had to disassociate myself from that and realize that Eza actually does live on. And the best way that Eza lives on is in my classroom, because Eza kind of has morphed into this instructional tool that we use week to week that I can kind of share with my students to kind of lift the instructional content off of the page and make it come to life and share like the real harsh realities of what it's like building a business. And so we talk a lot about resilience, entrepreneurial resilience in the context of Eza too. So it's been quite humbling and I'm very grateful that I'm able to use as that instructional tool.
Going back to your failure comment, Ellie, from before, I'm currently almost done with it, but I'm reading the book, How to Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And in that there's a quote I think that is like so spot on with what you're talking about. He says, every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. And I've kept reading that over and over again, because I think it's easy to focus on like, okay, there's the failure piece, but like the seed of an equivalent advantage, I think is sounds like exactly like what you're talking about with Eza, where it's like, it would be easy to chalk that up as a, hey, you know what, we folded the business, COVID, the list goes on. But I think it's important for people to hear like that seed of equivalent advantage is still, it's sprouting in what you're doing with students and other entrepreneurial influences that you have. So I'd be curious to hear what those types of insights look like for students, other entrepreneurs that you come across with. Like, what's the stuff that you're helping them cling to in their journey?
It's a really, really good question. And I love that quote, by the way. I'm going to think about it more later after this.
We can send it to you, Andrew. I've had to think about that for a little while. I'm like,
I love it. I love it. I think it's so insightful. So using Eza as a vehicle to discuss entrepreneurial resilience has been really, I think, impactful in my classroom, because I think a lot of MBA students struggle with the concept of resilience, because it's not something that you can study. It's not something that, no matter how many classes you take, no matter how many financial models you build or how many research papers you read, you cannot acquire resilience. It's not a grade. You can't get a grade on it. The only way to build resilience and to build, I would truly believe it's a muscle of resilience, is through experience and through failure. You have to be uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And a lot of MBA students struggle with that, because our entire lives we're taught to succeed, to work for that success. And academia in and of itself, to be honest, like the way that grades work is it penalizes mistakes and it embraces the successes, right? So like our brains are conditioned at a very young age to be paralyzed by fear of failure. Failure is bad. Failure means that you have low self-worth. You have low value to bring. Like, actually, it's quite the opposite. And I actually think about this a lot when raising my kids too, is like how to build that emotion, that muscle of resilience. And so we talk about that in my class, and I, over week by week, showcase in different examples in which resilience pops up, but then also helps them reflect on their own failures and reframe how they think about them. So I actually have my students build a resume of failure, and I have them analyze each experience and say, instead of, what you've accomplished and quantitatively what you achieved within that role, as a traditional resume, it's what have you failed at and what did you learn
That's amazing.
from this?
How's their response to that when you do that?
Oh my gosh, the students are so scared in the beginning to do it. They're so hesitant, but by the end, it's the conversations when they actually share.
They're so good.
Reflect. It's so good. It's so meaty, because it showcases that shift in perspective, and then allows the student, sets the tone for the class where they are able to embrace failure and mistakes as a part of the course and feel proud about them and think about what they've learned. So like in my Building the New Venture course, the students work in teams to simulate building a new venture throughout the first 18 months. So conceivably, they are making mistakes week to week. And it's hard for students to kind of wrap their heads around those mistakes until you kind of provide that context. And it's really fun to be able to see how much their willingness to take risks changes once you set that tone.
Is the emotion they're feeling, you said they're scared, and I want to double click into that. Is it fear or is it shame when they're drafting that document?
It's a really good question. I think because like I said, failure does feel so personal, right? And it does trigger these feelings of embarrassment and like loss of reputation, that shame can be, it's the next door neighbor to embarrassment. Probably both. But the goal of the course is to disassociate from that shame. There is no shame in failure. You cannot have success without failure, especially in entrepreneurship. You have to get comfortable with making mistakes and pivoting and getting up and brushing your knees off and trying it again. And figuring out where the lesson is and learning from it, growing from it, and being a lifelong learner. That's what it's all about.
That's so good.
Another theme in this book has been persistence, and like it's so simple to me. Like in my mind, just stay at it. But I think that theme for people, it seems like it's the close sibling to resilience. But and even with students or with other entrepreneurs, founders that you're working with, like how would you like describe what strong persistence looks like or resilience looks like? I guess you could use as interchangeable.
Right. I don't know. I actually don't think that persistence and resilience are interchangeable.
Great. I would love to hear your distinction, because I've like wrestled. I'm like, is that the same thing? It's hard to distinguish it sometimes for me. Right.
There are, if there's like a Venn diagram, there's a lot of overlap in the middle, but I think they are different. And I used to, before being an entrepreneur, I used to think they were the same, because having worked at Teach for America, having worked, turning around schools on the South Side and West Sides of Chicago, like persistence and resilience was an essential part of our daily life there. And so I considered myself as someone who had a lot of grit, someone who never gave up, basically. Even at a young age, like when I did in like middle school cross country, I was the slowest person on the team, and like would work as hard as I could. I eventually made it to the varsity in high school, and I was just someone who I don't know, maybe it's out of like pure stubbornness, like always try to persist and not give up. But within EZA, I had my co-founder and I, Kim, and I shared that definition, shared that love of persistence and that commitment, I should say, maybe to persistence to a fault, because we didn't want to give up. We felt like at the end, when we were realizing, the world had changed, business model didn't work, what was holding us back was ego, but also this like identity, like our identity was wrapped around this commitment around persistence and not giving up, that it didn't make sense. It would have been, like I said, death by 1,000 cuts if we persisted. But it required an enormous amount of resilience to make that decision.
Right.
I love that. I love how you distinguish that, because I think it's easy for me to blend the two. But like, you could persist at something that frankly is like I'm chasing my tail in a way. But to your point, the resilience aspect is like I'm getting to a whole other level maybe at that decision.
Resilience persistence, I feel like, is just like is this like physical fortitude to just like keep going, like against the grain, or keep going, like keep swimming against the waves coming at you. And there's a lot of value in that. But resilience, I think, requires not just like physical fortitude, but mental fortitude. And to push past our own, I think, innate like insecurities as human beings, and get to a better and stronger place.
Your experience is kind of a perfect case study in why those two things overlap but are not the same. Because you could have continued to be persistent, but I think the counterfactual is interesting to consider in the sense of, if you did not have internal resilience, you would have rejected the notion of shutting the company down because it would have ruined you. Right? Like if your identity had, if you did not display servant leadership in that moment, you would have kept being persistent.
Yep.
Because you were lacking in resilience to say, I can shut this down and still be okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
really well
powerful.
said.
Yeah. Man, Ellie, what a story. I'm so grateful you're sharing with us. You've now been in the nonprofit sector. You've been a high growth tech tech founder, or tech and brick and mortar founder. You're a professor now. You invest. And we'll come back to those last two pieces. The question I have is actually business model. If you were, or perhaps you even have ideas, no need to share, but if you were going to start another company, and your heart for impact and justice is really, it's bold and it's beautiful, and I'm grateful that you shared it with us. With that goal of impact and obviously having a successful organization, would you start a business in the nonprofit sector, or would you do something that's in the for-profit? And why is one of those better from an impact perspective?
It's a really great question. I do think that in the future, I will start another business. I think it's just like a part of who I am. I'm an entrepreneur through and through. I think for right now, my purpose and passion lies in investing in the next generation of entrepreneurs, and in teaching and in working in venture. If I were to start another business in the future, I never say never. So I'm always open to like.
We won't hold you to it. Yeah, that's right.
Any opportunity. But I think that I would probably more go towards for-profit, because I truly do believe that you can build a profitable a business built on profit and purpose, that the two can go well together. And quite honestly, you can probably achieve better profits by focusing on purpose. And have an impact in that way. I think that my experience in nonprofit, just with all of the red tape and the barriers and just we'll just put it that like, who is president also affects a lot of what is able to be accomplished in the nonprofit sector, makes me nervous.
Yeah. You have less control. You have less control to affect the outcome that you desire.
Yes, but I do believe that nonprofits have a huge role in society, and are very, very important. And I think that we should all be working together in servitude of creating value for the people of the world. So it's very much a Teach for America framework. Like at Teach for America, I think 60% of alum stay in education as teachers, but 40% go off to be doctors, lawyers, go off to different professions. And the idea is that you have people around the world in different sectors and industries who have the experience of working in an underserved community as a teacher that can bring those learnings to those professions to ultimately make a change in the world.
Yeah.
And so in that same respect, I believe that nonprofits and for-profits can be working together.
Sure.
For that.
No, I appreciate that. It's a helpful perspective.
And Ellie, go,
Ryan.
Mark, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to fast forward us just because I want to get to all the other things she has going on, which is just the list is fantastic. So the professorship at Booth, you've touched on it a little bit. There might be more to share there, but I'm also really curious to hear about your experience investing at Long Jump.
Sure.
And where I really want to take all of it, Allie, is into this model that I think you're really leading the charge on, which you call founder diligence, in terms of how we think about startups and what we look for in those startups, or more specifically in the leadership of those startups.
Yes.
So take us through the evolution of those roles and how it's led to this perspective on founder diligence.
Sure. So I think after winding down I was thinking about what that next chapter of my life was going to be and how I could use these learnings to, help the next generation of entrepreneurs. And venture capital is actually something that an industry that I never thought I would also ever be a part of. I had raised capital as a female entrepreneur in the beauty industry in Chicago, and it was extraordinarily challenging to get institutional capital. And so I had my own biases from a founder perspective, to be quite honest, around venture capital. But the more I thought about it, the more I talked to different venture firms about the opportunity to make an impact from the inside, the more passionate I got about the opportunity. And so today I work at Long Jump as a founder partner. And what I love about Long Jump is that it is all of the partners are former operators or current operators. So they all carry with them the founder experience that they can share with, we can share with our portfolio of founders. And we're focused on funding underrepresented, overlooked founders and companies, which is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. So I'm sure, as you all know, like venture capital is traditionally dominated by white men. I think I read a statistic that 19% of venture firms have a female partner on the team. And so I think that that's a huge problem, and that narrative needs to change because, in venture capital, we are the ones who allocate the capital to help fund businesses and, spearhead innovation. And if you only have one type of person at the table, you are losing out. You're missing out on a diverse set of perspectives and innovation as well. So we need to fund more different types of people and different types of businesses, I think, to level up innovation. And so being a founder partner at Long Jump gives me that opportunity to kind of have that impact from the inside.
That's awesome. What a unique firm. And talk a little bit about this founder diligence perspective.
Oh, yes.
You had some thought leadership on that recently, and I'd be curious for you to share with everybody else.
Oh, yeah. So as I was thinking about diligence in venture, I realized that a lot of diligence, which I understand why, is focused on kind of the business model, market opportunity of a company. And I feel like 90+% of diligence is really focused on that. But very little is focused on actually understanding the founders in front of you. And especially at the very early stage, the founders are the ones who are building the business. They're the ones doing the dirty work, like on the ground every day. The success of the business is dependent upon the founder's ability to execute and lead, inspire, recruit a team. I mean, and so I just question, like, why isn't there more protocol or systems around understanding the founder? And I realized that a lot of the time it's because it's really uncomfortable to talk about things that they could be potentially personal. And so to a founder and to a venture capitalist. And like digging in deep though into the psyche of the founder actually can help you as an investor help your founder better. And so understanding their level of, emotional regulation, their emotional intelligence, their level of empathy towards other people. Like there's a lot of research that shows that the best leaders actually have high EQ, high levels of empathy, because they're able to understand the needs of others. And in understanding the needs of others, others feel seen, others feel heard, and then they are, more fulfilled at work. So you're better able to recruit and hold a high performing team. The relationship between co-founders as well. That, I mean, I learned a lot about it as a two. So thankful for my co-founder, Kim. She was also Teach for America. So we both had like very much aligned values. But I mean, I think Carta just came out with data that showed that the number one or one of the biggest reasons why startups fail is because of toxic co-founder dynamics. And that is like also an uncomfortable topic to dig into, because you're forcing co-founders to talk about things that they don't want to share with their investors, right? Like you want as a founder to just show all the successes and all the bright spots and maybe some of the business challenges that can be kind of solved. But like the interpersonal relationship stuff is goes a little bit deeper, and I think we should evaluate that.
100%. Brian's heard this like 3 times now, but it's my new favorite saying, which is the grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greener over the septic tank.
Oh,
I mean, that's the whole thing.
It's a good one.
Like we can't move forward. You can't establish trust and build an organization that thrives if there's unmet toxic relationships, right? If there's things we haven't talked through. So Allie, it's so powerful. It's such a powerful perspective, and one I agree with. Ryan, I'm sorry, I have one other question. I know you're holding on to one, but Allie, if you could go back to day one, you and Kim, and you doing founder diligence on yourself, what is the area that you would have had to focus on? Or what would you have as an investor said to yourself of like, hey, I need you to dig in here because this needs improvement?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Gosh. That is a really great question. So if an investor was evaluating me at the early stage, I think that they probably, So, okay, here's the true answer to that. The true answer to that is uncovering the role that ego plays within the dynamic of my co-founder and I. So I think that, so I was the CEO, the like original founder with the idea. My co-founder was the COO, and we worked very well together because we had different skill sets, but shared aligned values. I actually don't necessarily love the spotlight, but I was in the spotlight a lot, just being the CEO and founder. My co-founder actually, I think, secretly liked this. We never actually talked about this, but I think secretly liked the spotlight and wanted the spotlight. And maybe that created some interesting dynamics between the two of us that we probably should have addressed from the beginning. And I think if the pandemic never happened, and if we were to have raised our Series A and go nationwide and like with more press and more attention, I think that probably would have like been something that we would have had to like talk through between the two of us. And I know that sounds very trivial, but it's I've talked to other founders who have expressed similar challenges, And it's something I never would have thought about, like talking about with my co-founder, like, how do you like to be rewarded? Or how do you like to be recognized? Like,
Yeah.
do you like to be recognized in a public way or in an internal way? Or we never had those conversations. And so I think digging into that.
It's really good. It's really
It's
good.
really good. And Allie, one of the things Mark and I have been fascinated with recently is this concept of the inner game. And Mark's written some stuff about it recently. I've been reading some stuff about it in your own experience and in the experience of investing in other founders. What do you feel like are good attributes of people that are focused on mastering that inner game when it comes to building businesses and other things too? But
Like, what are the characteristics of
just like what do you feel like if someone's trying to master the inner game of how they handle kind of the mental side of things, or even taking care of themselves, or just kind of the health side, whatever that may be? What are things that you've seen that people have started to kind of crack the code on that in a positive way?
This might be overly simplistic, but I think self-awareness is the number one most important quality and attribute to be able to kind of understand how to achieve that, because everyone is different, right? Balance looks different for everyone. And what outlets actually lead to fulfillment, de-stress you are just different from person to person. And so someone who's self-aware and can say, hey, I'm someone that my personality is like, my brain works 24/7. I'm not able to kind of shut it off. But I eventually, after some time, need some sort of like 1 to 2 day rejuvenation session, whatever it may be, by being like outdoors or going for a run or being with my family, whatever it may be. Or versus somebody who's like, okay, well, actually, I need something that's more balanced from a day-to-day perspective. Like, I'm someone that is going to have a very routine schedule from this time to this time. I'm going to spend time with my family in the evenings from 6 to 8, and then I'm going to work from this time to this time and get this amount of sleep. Like, what are the things that you need from a long-term perspective in order to show up as the best version of yourself? And it's okay for things to look different from person to person. I think that if you have a co-founder too and a partner, you need to understand that of each other as well and accept that. Because a huge issue amongst co-founders, a lot of the times that I see, is that one feels like they do more work than the other. And it's often because the work is only counted if it's like, if you're able to see it in front of you. And people work in different ways. And so you have to be, just because someone's not up at 2 a.m. in the morning doesn't mean that they're not working or not working efficiently. And so really having the self-awareness around what will help you show up as the best version of yourself, I think, is the most important attribute.
It's well said.
Self-awareness. Allie, as we start to wrap up, I'm just really grateful for this conversation. I've learned a ton and appreciate you sharing your story. I know I'm sure it's still, you still feel the bitterness of that.
Yeah.
Raw, there's the word. And last question, as we kind of go back there, if you could go back to Allie the day before you're about to officially launch As a Nails, right? And think about one piece of advice that you might give to yourself. What would that piece of advice be and why?
So I think closing out this theme of resilience, I would absolutely share with myself, do not be afraid of failure. Do not let failure paralyze yourself, because it will limit your potential. And you won't be like achieve. You're able to achieve. I don't know. No, let me pause. I think what I would tell myself is that not to be afraid of failure, not to be paralyzed by that fear, and instead embrace it and use it as a tool to learn, use it as a tool to better understand myself as a leader, and the future ahead of me as well.
Beautiful.
Love that.
It's beautiful. Allie, thank you. Thank you for sharing your very personal story and just for being so honest and vulnerable with us. I'm struck by, I just want to go back to one of the first things you said, which was failure is the unsung hero of success. I am going to sit with that. I'm going to reflect on that as an incredible,
that's really well said,
incredibly powerful reminder. And I hope each and every person that listens to this can really internalize that and believe it for themselves. So
Thanks
thank you for
me.
being here. We're really grateful for your time.
Thanks, Allie. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for engaging with this episode of the Masters of Resilience podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend or colleague. Stay up to date on all the latest episodes and get exclusive resources at mastersofresilience.com. We'll see you next time.